They say the heart of a home is the people who fill it, but I always believed it was the memories. Memories of laughter echoing through the walls, whispered secrets shared under soft lamplight, and the warmth of simply being together. By that definition, Emma and I had built ourselves the perfect home. We'd been married for 8 years, together for nearly a decade, and though life had its moments of monotony, I thought we were happy. She was my world, the quick wit to my steady calm, the dreamer to my pragmatist. Together, we'd built a comfortable life. Yet, as Emma often said, comfort is the enemy of growth. And she'd been eager to move on to bigger things. That's how the search for a new home began. "This one has a walk-in closet," Emma said one evening, scrolling through listings on her phone. The glow from the screen lit up her face as she leaned back on the couch. "And look at the backyard. It's perfect for summer barbecues." I nodded from the other side of the room, where I was sorting through old papers. "We don't even have a grill, Em." "We will. And wouldn't it be nice to host? Imagine all the space. Everyone will have room to breathe." She smiled as though picturing a scene I couldn't see. That was Emma, always thinking a step ahead. The truth was, I didn't mind our current home. Sure, the kitchen could use an update, and the guest room was too small to ever be practical. But it was ours. Still, seeing her so animated about the possibilities made it hard to argue. Emma dove into the process with the kind of fervor that made me fall in love with her in the first place. She started researching neighborhoods, mortgage rates, and school districts, even though kids weren't on our immediate radar. She insisted on working with Derek, a realtor who came highly recommended by one of her friends. "He's supposed to be amazing," Emma had said. "Knows the market inside and out." The first time we met Derek, I couldn't deny his charm. He was tall, with a movie star smile and a knack for making you feel like the most important person in the room. The kind of guy who could sell water to a drowning man. I wasn't immune to his charisma, but it was Emma who seemed utterly captivated. "Wow, this is stunning," she exclaimed during our first viewing. Derek grinned. "Just wait until you see the master bedroom. You'll love it." The way Emma's eyes lit up at his words sent a faint pang through me. It was ridiculous, really. He was just doing his job, and she was excited about the house, not him. At least, that's what I told myself. Over the next few weeks, house hunting became our shared project, though Emma often took the lead. She and Derek seemed to hit it off right away, exchanging ideas and discussing listings with an energy that left me trailing behind. "Derek thinks this area is up and coming," Emma would say, rattling off statistics about property values and resale potential. "Derek mentioned this one has a great school nearby. Not that we need that, but still." I began to wonder if I was imagining things. Emma wasn't doing anything wrong, not really. But there were subtle changes, barely perceptible shifts that only someone who knew her as well as I did might notice. She was always eager to talk about the houses, but when it came to us, our plans, our future, she seemed more distant. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, I asked, "What's got you so excited about moving? You've been buzzing about this nonstop." She looked up, startled, as though I'd caught her off guard. I think it's time for a change, you know? A fresh start." "A fresh start?" Her smile faltered for a moment before she shrugged. "Not like that. Just new scenery. A bigger space. Doesn't that sound nice?" I nodded slowly, though her words lingered in my mind. A fresh start. By the time the weekend rolled around, Emma had lined up 3 viewings. I offered to come along, but she insisted she could handle it. "Derek's got everything mapped out," she said. "I'll fill you in when I get back." For the first time in years, I spent Saturday alone. It wasn't unpleasant, but it felt strange. Emma returned home that evening brimming with stories about crown molding and open floor plans. Her enthusiasm was contagious, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Over the next few weeks, these solo viewings became more frequent. Emma claimed it was easier for her to go alone since my schedule was less flexible. I didn't argue, though I noticed her coming home later each time, her cheeks flushed and her energy electric. Traffic was terrible, she'd say, or Derek and I got caught up discussing one of the listings. I told myself it was nothing. After all, she'd always been passionate when she set her mind to something. This was no different. But the subtle changes between us were hard to ignore. The easy intimacy we once shared felt strained, replaced by polite conversations and quick kisses before bed. "Is everything okay?" I asked one night as we lay in the dark. Emma hesitated. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" "I don't know," I admitted. "You've just seemed preoccupied." She reached for my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "It's just the stress of house hunting. I promise, once we find the right place, everything will fall into place." I wanted to believe her. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I told myself that every marriage had its ups and downs. That this was just a phase. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the faint whisper of doubt that had begun to take root. The search for a new home had begun, but I was starting to wonder if we were looking for more than just a house. It started with small things, barely noticeable at first. A missed dinner here, an unanswered text there. Emma had always been busy. Her work as a freelance designer often consumed her, but lately, her distractions seemed different. More personal. "Sorry I'm late," she said one evening as she walked in, carrying takeout containers from our favorite Thai place. "The last house ran over, and Derek and I grabbed a bite to discuss options." I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been half-heartedly working on a report. "You could have called." I waited. Her face softened into a look of guilt. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would take so long." Her apology felt sincere, and I wanted to let it go. But when she leaned over to kiss my forehead, I caught the faintest whiff of cologne, sharp, unfamiliar, and not mine. "Did Derek drive you?" I asked casually. Emma hesitated, unwrapping her food. "Yeah. My car's been making that weird noise, remember? I figured it was easier to ride with him." I nodded, though something about her answer didn't sit right. Derek had become a constant presence in her conversations, but this was the first time she'd mentioned spending time with him outside of viewings. "It's just work," I told myself. "Nothing more." But as the days turned into weeks, Emma's preoccupation grew harder to ignore. It wasn't just her absence during the viewings. It was the way she carried herself, an energy I hadn't seen in her in years. She seemed more alive, more vibrant, as if some invisible spark had reignited within her. On Saturday mornings, she'd get up early to check out a new listing, or revisit one that might have potential. I offered to come along, but she always found a reason for me to stay behind. "You hate open houses," she'd say with a laugh. "You've got that thing with the guys later, don't you? No sense in wasting their time." She wasn't wrong. I wasn't a fan of traipsing through strangers' homes, pretending to imagine us living there. And I did have plans with my friends occasionally. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was creating space between us on purpose. The turning point came one night when Emma's fitness tracker buzzed on the coffee table. She was in the shower, and I glanced at the screen out of habit. Activity goal exceeded. It wasn't unusual. Emma had taken up walking as a way to unwind after work. But what caught my eye was the timing. According to the notification, she'd logged her steps around 2 p.m., right when she was supposed to be at a viewing. "Must have been a big house," I muttered to myself, trying to dismiss the unease creeping in. When Emma returned from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, I asked casually, "How was the viewing today?" She smiled, brushing her wet hair out of her face. "Good. Nothing spectacular, though. I don't think it's the one." "Big place?" "Not really. Just standard." Her response was so nonchalant that I felt ridiculous even questioning it. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the tracker. If the house wasn't big, where had all those steps come from? The next few weeks followed a similar pattern. Emma's activity levels spiked during times when she was supposedly at viewings, often in short, intense bursts. It wasn't just walking, it was running, climbing, movement that didn't align with the quiet house tours she described. I tried to brush it off, but my curiosity got the better of me. One afternoon, while Emma was out, I synced her tracker data with my laptop. The results left me more confused than ever. Her activity wasn't just out of place, it was inconsistent with the locations she claimed to visit. One afternoon, she said she'd been touring a mid-century home in the suburbs, but her tracker logged her steps miles away, near a park we'd never been to. At first, I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she'd gone for a walk afterward or taken a detour to clear her head. But the discrepancies kept piling up, and each new inconsistency felt like a pebble added to the weight pressing on my chest. One evening, Emma came home later than usual, her cheeks flushed and her smile wide. "Good news," she announced, dropping her bag on the counter. "Derek found a place that might be perfect. I'm seeing it tomorrow." I forced a smile. "You've been spending a lot of time with him lately." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Well, he's our realtor. That's kind of the point." "Yeah, but it feels like you're doing this whole thing on your own. We're supposed to be in this together, remember?" Her expression softened, and she reached for my hand. "I know, and I'm sorry. I want this to be perfect for us. Once I narrow it down, you'll be there for the big decisions. I promise." Her words were reassuring, but they didn't ease the knot in my stomach. The following weekend, I decided to test my suspicions. While Emma was out at yet another viewing, I drove to the address she'd left on the kitchen counter. It was a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place I could see us living in. But Emma wasn't there. I waited for nearly an hour, watching as a young couple arrived, toured the home with a different realtor, and left. Emma never showed. When I got home, she was already there, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine. "How was it?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "It's nice," she said with a shrug. "But not quite right. I think we'll keep looking." I nodded, the weight of my suspicions growing heavier by the second. That night, as Emma slept beside me, I opened her fitness tracker app on my phone. The data for the day showed another spike in activity, this time near a hotel on the other side of town. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, the realization sinking in like a stone. Emma wasn't just distant. She was lying to me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to face. Something was happening. Something that went beyond house hunting. And I was determined to find out the truth. It began with a hunch, a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispering that something wasn't right. By now, that voice had grown into a roar, impossible to ignore. Every instinct I had told me Emma was hiding something, but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that the woman I'd loved for nearly a decade could betray me. But doubt has a way of gnawing at you, leaving you restless and consumed. So, I started looking for answers. The first thing I did was revisit the data from Emma's fitness tracker. Each time she claimed to be at a house viewing, her location told a different story. One afternoon, she logged steps at a hiking trail nearly 20 miles from the address she'd given me. Another time, the data placed her at a bustling shopping district, not exactly prime real estate territory. I began keeping a journal, noting every inconsistency. I recorded the addresses she mentioned, the times she left and returned, and the tracker's location data. Patterns started to emerge. Most of her unexplained activity occurred near a handful of spots around town, parks, hotels, and one particular restaurant we'd never visited together. It wasn't just the locations. Emma's behavior had shifted, too. She seemed more guarded, quick to change the subject whenever I asked about her day. Her phone, once left carelessly around the house, was now glued to her side, always locked. One day, curiosity got the better of me. While Emma was in the shower, I picked up her phone. It was password protected, of course, but I'd seen her unlock it enough times to know the code. My hands trembled as I tapped it in. The Messages app was the first place I looked. Most of the conversations were innocent, chats with friends, updates from clients. But then I saw Derek's name. Their messages weren't overly suspicious at first glance. They discussed listings, scheduling viewings, and market trends. But the tone felt Off. Emma, thanks for today. Couldn't have done it without you. Derek, always happy to help. You make it easy. I scrolled further, my stomach churning with every line. There were subtle hints, inside jokes, late-night exchanges about things unrelated to real estate. It wasn't concrete proof, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. I returned her phone just as the shower stopped running. My heart pounded as I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to act normal. The next day, I decided to pay Derek's office a visit. I told myself it was to gather information, but deep down, I think I wanted confirmation of what I already feared. When I walked into the sleek, modern office, I was greeted by a cheerful receptionist who introduced herself as Lily. "Hi, I'm Mark," I said, forcing a smile. "My wife and I have been working with Derek on some house viewings. I was hoping to get a quick update." Lily's eyes lit up. "Oh, of course. Let me check his calendar. What's your wife's name?" "Emma." Lily typed into her computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Then she frowned. "Huh. That's odd. What is?" She glanced at me, a hint of hesitation in her eyes. "It looks like Derek has only one viewing scheduled for this week, and it's with another client." "Are you sure your wife said she was meeting him today?" My stomach dropped. "She's mentioned seeing multiple houses with him recently. Are you sure that's all?" Lily hesitated again, then leaned closer. "Off the record, Derek sometimes works outside the system. You know, private showings for high-profile clients. It might not show up here." I nodded, my mind racing. Right. That makes sense. But it didn't make sense. Not at all. That evening, Emma returned home with the same glowing energy she'd had for weeks. "How was your day?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Great," she said, kicking off her shoes. "Saw a couple of places with Derek. Nothing promising, though." Her words felt like a slap. I wanted to confront her right then, to demand the truth. But I knew I needed more than suspicions and half-truths. The next day, I took things a step further. I called the restaurant where Emma's tracker had placed her a few days prior. "Hi," I said, adopting a cheerful tone. "My wife and I dined with you recently, and I lost a bracelet. I'm hoping you might have found it." The hostess on the other end was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, sir, but we haven't had any bracelets turned in." "Do you remember what day you were here?" "Tuesday afternoon," I said. "Around 2 p.m. There was a pause. "Tuesday? Let me check." I waited, my palms slick with sweat. "Sir," she said after a moment, "I do remember a couple here around that time. A man and a woman. But I don't recall seeing anyone else in their party." My breath caught. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. They sat in the corner booth. I remember because they seemed close." I thanked her and hung up, my mind spinning. That night, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Emma," I said as we sat in the living room, her laptop balanced on her knees. "Can we talk?" "Of course," she said, looking up with a smile. I took a deep breath. "Where were you Tuesday afternoon?" Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I told you. I was at a house viewing." "No, you weren't," I said, my voice firmer now. "I know you weren't." Emma stared at me, her expression shifting from confusion to something harder to read. "What are you talking about?" "I've been tracking your fitness data," I admitted. "And your location doesn't match where you said you'd be." Her eyes widened, a mix of shock and anger flashing across her face. "You've been spying on me?" "I had to," I said, my voice cracking. "Because you've been lying to me. Don't deny it, Emma. I know you've been spending time with Derek outside of these so-called viewings." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, with a trembling voice, she said, "Mark, I think you're overreacting." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not. I spoke to someone at Derek's office. You haven't been seeing houses. So tell me the truth, Emma. What's going on?" She stood up, her hands trembling. "I can't do this right now." "Yes, you can," I said, blocking her path. You owe me that much. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I thought she might come clean. But instead she pushed past me and disappeared into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, my chest heaving, the weight of her silence more damning than any confession. Whatever was happening, it was clear, the woman I thought I knew was slipping further and further away. By the time the weekend rolled around, the tension in our house was unbearable. Emma and I moved around each other like strangers, barely exchanging more than a few words. The air between us felt thick, heavy with unspoken truths that neither of us was brave enough to voice. I knew I couldn't let it go on like this. The questions, the doubts, they were consuming me. If there was a chance to salvage what we had, I needed the truth. Saturday morning, Emma announced she was heading out to check on a listing Derek mentioned. The casualness in her tone made my stomach churn. Can I come with you? I asked, forcing a smile. She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward me before she grabbed her keys. I think it's better if I go alone. It's just a preliminary walk-through, and you'll probably find it boring. I nodded, masking the storm brewing inside me. Okay. Have fun. As soon as the door closed behind her, I grabbed my jacket and car keys. I waited until her car disappeared down the street before pulling out of the driveway. Over the past few days, I'd done my homework. Emma's fitness tracker had logged repeated activity spikes near a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. If my suspicions were correct, that's where she'd be. The drive felt endless, each mile stretching out as my mind raced with possibilities. Part of me still clung to the hope that I was wrong, that there was some innocent explanation for everything. But deep down, I already knew. When I arrived, I parked across the street, far enough to avoid drawing attention. From my vantage point, I had a clear view of the hotel entrance. I didn't have to wait long. Emma's car pulled into the lot, and my heart sank as I watched her step out. She was dressed casually but with a deliberate polish, jeans that hugged her figure, a sweater that brought out the color in her eyes. She looked beautiful. Too beautiful for a simple house viewing. A few moments later, another car pulled in beside her. My chest tightened as I recognized the driver. Derek. They greeted each other warmly, too warmly, and my stomach twisted as he placed a hand on her lower back, guiding her toward the entrance. I sat frozen in my car, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. It felt like the world had stopped, the air sucked out of my lungs. I could have driven away, spared myself the humiliation of what I was about to do. But something inside me refused to back down. I needed to confront her. The hotel lobby was quiet, the hum of soft jazz music playing in the background. The receptionist looked up as I entered, her friendly smile faltering when she saw the expression on my face. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. "I'm looking for my wife," I said, my voice tight. "Emma Coleman. She just checked in with a man named Derek." The receptionist blinked, clearly caught off guard. I'm not sure I can." "Please," I interrupted, my voice cracking. "I need to know where she is." She hesitated, then glanced down at her computer. After a moment, she nodded toward the elevator. "Room 304. I didn't wait for her to say more. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow, every second stretching into an eternity. My mind raced with images of what I might find behind that door, each scenario worse than the last. When I reached the third floor, I hesitated outside room 304, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear faint laughter from inside, muffled but unmistakably Emma's. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I knocked. The laughter stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the door opened a crack, and Derek's face appeared. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm when he saw me. "Mark? Where's Emma?" I demanded, my voice low and steady. Before he could respond, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was modest but cozy, a king-sized bed dominating the space. Emma stood near the window, her face pale as she turned to face me. "Mark," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't," I snapped, holding up a hand. Don't say my name like that. Just tell me the truth. How long has this been going on? Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it. But then she crumpled, her shoulders shaking as she began to cry. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. Her admission hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the air leave my lungs, my vision blurring as the weight of her words settled over me. How long? I asked again, my voice trembling. She hesitated, then said, A few months. I turned to Derek, who stood frozen by the door. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Mark, Get out. He glanced at Emma, then back at me, before slipping out of the room without another word. When he was gone, I turned back to Emma. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why would you do this to us? She wiped at her tears, her hands trembling. I don't know. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You didn't mean for it to go this far? I repeated, my anger boiling over. That's your excuse? You've been lying to me, sneaking around, destroying everything we've built, and that's all you have to say? Her sobs grew louder, and she sank onto the bed. I was unhappy, Mark. I didn't know how to tell you. And Derek, he made me feel alive again. Her words cut deeper than any knife. Alive? Is that what I wasn't giving you? Did our marriage mean so little to you that you threw it away for a fling? It wasn't a fling, she said softly. I love him. The room spun, her confession hitting me like a freight train. You love him, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. Well, I hope he was worth it, because you just destroyed everything we had. The drive home was a blur, my mind numb as I tried to process what had just happened. I felt hollow, as if some vital part of me had been ripped away. When I walked into the house, the silence was deafening. Every room felt like a monument to a life I no longer recognized. That night, I sat alone in the dark, replaying Emma's words over and over in my mind. She was sorry. She didn't mean for it to happen. She loved him. The truth was out, but it didn't bring the closure I'd hoped for. It only brought more pain. The days following Emma's confession were a blur. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, felt like a hollow shell of its former self. Each corner, each piece of furniture, was a reminder of the life we had built together, a life she had so carelessly dismantled. I spent those first few days in a daze, oscillating between heartbreak and anger. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake in the silence, haunted by the echoes of her voice and the weight of her betrayal. My mind replayed every moment we'd shared, every smile, every touch, now tainted by the knowledge of what she'd done. I had loved her so completely, trusted her so implicitly. And yet, here I was, standing in the ruins of our marriage, trying to make sense of the senseless. Emma stayed in the house for a few days after the confrontation, but the atmosphere was unbearable. We spoke little, each interaction laden with tension and pain. I found myself avoiding her, retreating to the spare bedroom to escape the sight of her. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, she approached me in the kitchen. I think it's best if I leave, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I looked up from my coffee, meeting her tearful gaze. Part of me wanted to beg her to stay, to try and salvage what was left. But another part, the part that had been shattered by her betrayal, knew that it was over. Okay, I said simply, my voice devoid of emotion. She nodded, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her decision had finally caught up with her. The day she packed her bags and left was surreal. I watched from the window as she loaded her car, the sight of her driving away both a relief and a heartbreak. I had hoped for so much more, for a love that would stand the test of time, for a partner who would be by my side through life's ups and downs. But that dream was gone now, replaced by the harsh reality of starting over. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into anything that would distract me from the pain. I started going to the gym, working out my frustrations on the weights. I began cooking elaborate meals, trying to fill the void left by Emma's absence. I even signed up for a woodworking class, something I'd always wanted to try but had never found the time for. The distractions helped, but the nights were still difficult. The quiet of the house was oppressive, a constant reminder of what I had lost. One evening, as I sorted through a box of old photos, I stumbled upon our wedding album. I hadn't looked at it in years, but now, with trembling hands, I flipped through the pages. There we were, young and smiling, so full of hope and promise. I traced my finger over Emma's face, the woman I had once believed would be my forever. Tears blurred my vision as I closed the album and set it aside. It hurt to see those memories, but it also reminded me of the love we had once shared, the love that had been real, even if it hadn't lasted. As time went on, I began to accept that healing wasn't a linear process. Some days were better than others. There were moments when I felt strong, ready to face the world and move forward. And there were others when the weight of it all came crashing down, leaving me in a heap on the floor. But through it all, I discovered something unexpected: resilience. I started seeing a therapist, someone who helped me untangle the complex web of emotions I was experiencing. With her guidance, I learned to let go of the guilt and self-blame that had plagued me. Emma's actions were her own, and they didn't define my worth. One day, while scrolling through social media, I came across a quote that resonated deeply with me. "Sometimes you have to let go of the life you plan to find the life that's waiting for you." It was a simple sentiment, but it struck a chord. I had spent so long mourning the loss of the life I thought I'd have with Emma that I hadn't stopped to consider what might come next. What kind of life could I build for myself now? Slowly but surely, I began to find answers. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years. I took up hiking, finding solace in the quiet beauty of nature. I even adopted a dog, a scrappy mutt named Max, who quickly became my loyal companion. Through these small steps, I started to rebuild. One evening, several months after Emma left, I received a text from her. "Emma, I hope you're doing okay. I'm sorry for everything." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. Finally, I typed back, "Me. I'm working on it. I hope you find what you're looking for." Her reply never came, and that was okay. Some things are better left in the past. Looking back now, I see that Emma's betrayal, as painful as it was, taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of trust. It's not a journey I would have chosen, but it's one that shaped me into the person I am today, stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the life I want to build for myself. The road ahead is still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. Hopeful that I can move on. Hopeful that I can find happiness again. Hopeful that, in the end, everything will be okay. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Leave a comment with your thoughts on the story. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new interesting stories. See you soon.